recognize this technique?
To start off, I'm not really going to get into the habit of doing a lot of retro reviews, mostly because there's a lot of YouTubers that do that already. I'm just a sucker for games that have a lot of history in them, and I think Portopia really satisfies that condition. With that out of the way, let's go back to the mythical era of 1982. Back then, a little-known game company called Enix, and something straight out of a reality TV show, held a programming competition to find new employees instead of the conventional way of looking through applications. Of the people who entered, both Yuji Horii and Koichi Nakamura were hired for their games Love Match Tennis and Door Door, respectively. Yuji Horii, now working for Enix, wrote and directed the Portopia serial murder case, and it was released for the NEC PC 8801, back when computers had complicated names, in 1983. Portopia at the time used a text-based parser requiring players to type commands such as take photo or open door. The game was received very well and was considered a starting point for the visual novel genre. Fast forward to 1985, after the release of the Famicom. Yuji Horii wanted to work on an RPG for the system, but Enix didn't think the console, mostly full of action game releases, was ready for an adventure game. So together Yuji and Koichi Nakamura joined together to port Portopia. The game received upgraded graphics, a new character, changing to a menu-based interaction system, and some new locations, but most notably was the addition of a first-person dungeon inspired by wizardry. Portopia was a smashing success, and that led Enix to go ahead on the creation of Dragon Warrior, which Yuji would lead. Yuji Horii didn't just have his hand in the creation of the visual novel genre, but also the creation of the JRPG as well. As for Koichi Nakamura, his company Chunsoft would later make RPGs and visual novels, including 999, 9 Persons, 9 Hours, 9 Doors, and Virtue's Last Reward, two of my favorite games of all time. Portopia is also one of the games that inspired the creator of Metal Gear Solid, Hideo Kojima, to start making video games. So yeah, the Portopia serial murder case is a pretty important game. Now that we're done with the learning foreplay, let's get down and dirty with this over-review.
Jesus Christ!
Okay, after the game's alarm clock goes off, it drops you right in. Like a lot of NES games, there's very little in the ways of introduction, which can be kind of an issue when you're supposed to investigate a murder. When I first started playing it, I was mostly confused, and it took me a bit to figure out the menus. The best place to start, I found, is with the Investigate Someone option. Through this, we learned that our victim's name is Kozo. He was the president of Yamakeen Loans, and people hated him, especially since he was involved in some shady deals. Using the Move option, we can, believe it or not, move to various locations in the game. Using this option, we can head to the study to find a chalk outline of his body. We can investigate things in the scene using the appropriately named Investigate Thing option. This brings up a list of things in the room that can be investigated. The different options prompt Yasu, our subordinate, to give a little description of each item. Every area can also be investigated with the magnifying glass, which allows you to find hidden items in the room. And when I say hidden, I mean there's literally no indication that an item is there before clicking it. An example of this is in the study. There's a portrait of Kozo in this room, and you can only get it by moving the magnifying glass to the bottom right-hand corner of the cabinet and pressing A. As you can see, there's nothing there on the screen, but we find it regardless. It doesn't help that some key information for solving the case is found this way. Without a guide or hours of time spent searching, you probably wouldn't find the items very easily. This is definitely a relic from the NES era that was meant to elongate game time. Anyway, in the study we find out Kozo was stabbed in the neck at 9 PM on the 17th. The kicker is the room was locked from the inside with a key inserted to the lock on Kozo's side, preventing the door from being opened by any key, meaning this is a sealed room case. This is basically the setup of the game, but before I get into the suspects, I want to go over some general points with the game design. With every NES game comes many limitations in which the game could be designed. It shows the true merit of a developer to overcome these limitations to create a successful experience. Portopia succeeds in many ways with this. Portopia didn't use a password system, so the game had to be designed around the idea that we played from the start every time you turn it on. This could have been a bad thing, but the developers made it work. For instance, the game's progression is fairly open-ended. The set goal is to find out who the murderer is, but the sequence of events doesn't always have to happen in the same order. If you do things in a different order when starting the game over, you can come across different information you didn't get the first time around. This makes you feel like you're still progressing in the case. The flip side of this is to keep track of information, you need to take notes on what you did as well as all the suspects that you've gathered. Here's what my really shitty notes look like. This might divide some people because the idea of taking notes while playing might turn some players off. However, I would argue that that form of interaction brings a game from your TV screen, or in my case, computer screen, into the real world. It has a sense of immersion to it. Also, unlike other adventure games of the time, you can never get stuck. No matter what you do in the game, you can only progress forward. This is nice compared to the King's Quest series, because you don't ever have the feeling that you fucked up somewhere real bad, and you won't be able to beat the game because of it. The frame of which the mystery is built on works surprisingly well to this day. Okay, I've rambled enough. Time for the suspects. First off, we got Toshi, Kozo's nephew, a man who loves leather jackets and assault almost as much as he loves schoolgirls. He was seen stalking the docks around the time of the murder. Next up is Fumi. She's Kozo's assistant. She found the body along with Mr. Komiya. She is really boring and I probably won't get along with her. Ew, girls! Third is Mr. Komiya. He's Kozo's live-in security guard who can't learn to take a hit. Swiggity bore, here comes number 4. Mr. Harada's been missing since the murder. A store owner, he took out a loan with Kozo and probably wants to kill him. Word on the street is he skipped town to go to Kyoto. Up next is Mr. Harada's daughter, Yukiko. The only thing she loves more than bad boys is bad decisions. She also has no alibi. Last is Yasu, my subordinate. He isn't really a suspect, but I wanted to segue into talking about him. Yasu is basically who does all the actions you select in the game. He's a pretty cool guy, except sometimes he refuses to do things for me. Like, come on man, I asked you to take the door. Also, he gives me snark sometimes when I ask him to find things with a magnifying glass. Don't tell me you found something when you clearly didn't. It's alright though, sometimes as a treat I order him to go to the strip club. So anyway, all the information about the characters I mentioned above is found through finding clues, questioning them, and calling them out on their bullshit with your evidence. There are a few side plots that play into the game, and it really fleshes out the characters just enough to make them feel like real people. For instance, one of the subplots is this note you find in Toshi's apartment. It's obviously just 3 words when you read it from top to bottom, which for some reason took me way too long to figure out. When you call the number, a guy tells you to meet him at the harbor. There he gives you a package of drugs. During the interrogation, Toshi admits that he was brokering a deal for the drugs at the time of the murder, clearing him. Then there's also this ring that you find outside the mansion, even though you have no reason to assume that there's something lying there. Toshi admits to have given the ring to Yukiko, but she totally denies any relation to him because she's probably really ashamed of him. Deep down inside, she really cares though. Maybe. Okay, back on track. After playing a while, I could not find any other lines to pursue when it came to finding Mr. Harada. I could travel to Kyoto where Mr. Harada had went, but I had no way to find him there. After a while of frustration, I broke and finally checked an online guide. It told me to go to Kyoto and call a specific number, but made no mention to where they found that number. Information about this game is really limited in the West, and after a while of searching, I could not find any information on where this number came from. It wasn't until I got to the very end of the game that a random text prompt in the police station told me that they found the note with the number on it in Yukiko's pocket. I tried using that information on another playthrough to see if I could find the note on her, but I didn't find it. As far as I know, that text prompt is the only way I can find that number in the game. So calling the number tells you the location of a park in Kyoto where Mr. Harada had last been seen. There we find he has hung himself. Yasu, 1000% done with my shit, tells me to close the case. I'm not about to close the case, so you search the ground under his feet to find a note that says he couldn't handle any more debt. Through a line of questioning with Yukiko, she admits that she went to Kozo on the night of his death to ask for more money because her father owed money to the wrong people. Kozo agreed to lend the money. This information basically clears Mr. Harada and Yukiko. After this, I was, however, stuck again. Due to the frustration, I returned to the online guide. This time, it turns out, I missed a lighter that was laying on the ground in the mansion. Blind guesses failed me again. With these items, you travel to the PAL bar that Kozo frequented, and show this one-armed barkeeper the lighter and a picture of Kozo. He tells you that Kozo had a big argument with Mr. Kawamura, who owns the lighter. Looks like we have another big suspect. Outside the bar, a local will tell you that Kawamura had a close relationship with a stripper named Okoi. At the police station, you call Okoi in for questioning since Kawamura is nowhere to be found. Since we are handsome, Okoi tells us that Kawamura and Kozo were once con men. Kozo was blackmailed by Kawamura, who wanted to reveal his past. You learn that Kawamura is at Sumire Apartments. Unfortunately, when you get there, he's sleeping in a pool of blood. I mean, he's dead. Yasu, of course, wants to close the case again. Back at the police station, questioning Okoi about Kawamura will land you with the information that Kozo once swindled Sawaki Industries and Sumoto into bankruptcy. She then casually brings up the fact that Fumi's last name is Sawaki because, you know, that's not important information at all. At Sumoto, you learn that Fumi has an older brother with a butterfly-shaped birthmark who disappeared after the company went under. I mentioned at the beginning of the video that there was a first-person exploration part added to the game. Well, this is it. It's actually really easy to stumble across in the very beginning of the game. All you have to do is take the picture off the wall and then press the button. I can imagine many people probably got stuck down there for a long time without realizing they missed something. Though as far as I know, there's only one thing to find down here, and it's next to impossible to find. I spent a lot of time down here trying to figure out where to go, only thinking that I needed to find an exit or something, but I was way off. No! You basically have to find this random as shit wall and bump into it 3 times. The only indication you get is it makes a different noise when you bump into it. Apparently the game designers thought this was enough. I'm sure there was a novelty to this at the time, and I kinda like what they were going for, but ultimately they failed when they made the solution too hard. So on the other side of the wall is Kozo's diary. He said that he hired Fumi knowing full well who she was because he felt guilty that he had wronged her family. Kozo was even going to look after her as though she were his own daughter, and leave part of his inheritance to her. That is kinda cute. Now do you know who the brother is? I'll give you a moment. It's poor young Yasu. After leaving the dungeon, you head back to the police station. In order to solve the case, you have to try and take Yasu's clothes off 3 times. On the 3rd try, he submits and reveals the butterfly birthmark. Yasu and Fumi go through the murder they committed together, and the game ends. Portopia ends up being a game that at its best feels satisfying and rewarding to uncover the mystery ahead of you. But at the same time, at its worst, it ends up being a game that leaves you completely lost, unsure what to do, until you actually bump into a wall 3 times. The characters are all really fleshed out well, and they all have their individual motivations. The writing handles the characters well, and it all comes together to create a compelling and competent mystery. Overall, I'm sure all these problems didn't really bother the gamers all that much back then. The gaming landscape was a lot different back then, and I'm sure Japanese gamers enjoyed spending hours upon hours searching through the maze, finding all the different clues, waiting until they can finally crack the case. Unfortunately for Portopia, those game design choices don't really hold up all that well today. It's unfortunate because those moments where the clues start to come together and you start to figure things out feels really satisfying. Those moments alone still make me view the game in a positive light. I just can't bring myself to not like it. It certainly broke the norm of all the action platformers that were so common on the NES. The Portopia serial murder case gets my utmost respect as a game. I guess deep down inside I'm just a sucker for a good mystery.